Up, STS Nation, and welcome to another episode of Surviving the Survivor, the podcast that promises to bring you the very best guests in all of true crime. It's not just a tagline, it is our reality, and you're about to see why. And if you're interested in the twisted mind of Lori Vallow Daybell, you've come on the right day because we have one therapist and two criminology professors, and I'm about to introduce you to them. It is week 5 of the Lori Vallow Daybell trial. This week, obviously, considered to be one of the most stunning and pivotal weeks in the trial, as it was revealed that a single hair on duct tape found around JJ's body on a plastic bag is in fact Lori Vallow's, and we'll ask our guests how important or not important that is. Most people think it is quite a salient point that the state made when they dropped that bomb earlier in the week. Now, of course, this is the trial of the so-called Doomsday Mom, the wildly twisted story of a seemingly loving mother, a self-proclaimed devout member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, who clearly veered way off course and became involved in the deaths of as many as 5 people, including her own children. Without further ado, best guest, Dr. Amy Shlosberg has a master's degree in forensic psychology. She is in blue, and a Ph.D., hence the doctor, in criminal justice. She is currently department chair and an associate professor of criminology at Fairleigh Dickinson University. And for those who don't know, it is from the great state of New Jersey. My hat is obscuring my Jersey flag. And congratulations to both of you, because Fairleigh Dickinson, I think they went to the Elite 8 this year, right? So it was a crazy run. Was it the Elite 8, Megan Sachs?
Oh, we didn't make it that far, but there was a major victory against, I guess it was Purdue, that no one expected. So it was a good moment for our school.
Maybe it was a Sweet 16. Anyway, nonetheless, a good run in the NCAA tournament. Next up, Megan Sachs, calling me out, and I love it, is a full professor of criminology at the graduate program, and I should say the graduate program director at Fairleigh Dickinson University. She teaches classes including women and crime, serial killers, and crime policy. And Amy and Megan co-host not one, but 2 podcasts, Women and Crime and Direct Appeal, now in season 2. So check out Direct Appeal anywhere you listen to podcasts. Darby Fox, originally we just found out from Idaho, which is fitting, is a child and adolescent family therapist with over 25 years of experience with children and families from diverse backgrounds. Darby's first book, Rethinking Your Teenager. I don't have teens yet, but I'm getting there. Shifting from conflict and control to structure and nurture to raise accountable young adults. That book received critical acclaim. You've seen her everywhere: ABC, NBC, CBS, Fox News, Newsmax, and she is a monthly contributor to Psychology Today. Some quick housekeeping notes. Follow us on Facebook, Insta, Twitter. We are at Podcast STS, where I post show times. And you can support us at Patreon, and you can become a YouTube member if you want. Our merch store is open, so that's exciting. You can get all kinds of swag, and we'll be putting new swag in there, and you can just follow the links in the bio to get there. And a special announcement today for Patreon and YouTube members. We are doing another meet and greet with yours truly. I had to negotiate long and hard and find time in her schedule, because there's never time in her schedule. She's off to a lecture this evening. So she is willing to do it on May 18th, and we will have a still to be determined best guest join her. So that is for Patreon and YouTube members. And without further ado, it is day 21 in this trial. And before we get into any of the testimony from today, the day-to-day stuff, there's some big picture questions. And one of them revolves Lori. And because courtroom observers are watching everything, as the jurors are, they're looking at Lori. And today, Lori was in there wearing a navy blue long sleeve shirt with a navy polka dot puffer type vest, according to reports. She had been wearing all black, and then she switched to a whitish color. All the jury consultants we had said she should be in cream and pastel colors to give a kind of lighter impression, not so heavy and somber like dark. But she was throughout this trial and today cackling, and then at times very serious looking, and then laughing with attorneys, and also taking notes. Sort of erratic behavior all the way through. To Darby Fox, the licensed therapist, what do you make of this kind of up and down behavior from her? At one point in this trial, someone even some people suspected her even of sleeping, saying that she was medicated. But just in general, I mean, how much is everyone watching her, and what do you make of it?
Well, I believe everybody is watching her. When you hear the details of the, alleged crimes, it's difficult not to watch her and see how does she react. These were her children, at least, right now, these were her children that we're talking about in the case. And it's very hard to watch and see that she has a real depraved difference to, I mean, how could you do this to any human being, let alone your children? So I think the scoffing and kind of the head down posture, the dressing, people are looking at that to see, is there any remorse? What's the connection? Could we have missed something? And I think her behavior really shows it's hard to diagnose. Is she a psychopath? Is she a sociopath, malignant narcissist? It's kind of all of the above because we're seeing the different characteristics, but she's not empathetic and sort of feels she's better than all of this. And that's where we see the disconnect. And that's hard to watch.
And Darby, right back at you. One of the rubs in this case has been against the defense team as a whole. At the very beginning, at the onset of the trial, they were interviewed, and Jim Archibald even at one point said, why is anyone in East Idaho even watching this? We find out you're from Idaho originally, that they quote unquote should have better things to do. People didn't think they responded well on cross to the discovery of this hair on the duct tape around the plastic bag. And some people say that they might, and I'm underscoring might, think that, she is guilty or just not, for whatever reason, not putting up as robust a defense as possible. So this question from STS Nation from Lindy Koyangi says, aloha, everyone. I believe we will soon hear a guilty verdict. Question: if you defend a known murderer, how does that affect you mentally? We don't have any lawyers, which is unusual for us on a night, but we're examining the psyche tonight. So, but I mean, what do you think it's like potentially for an attorney if they are starting to believe that their client might be guilty and they have to go through these motions to defend them, Darby?
That's a great question. It's interesting. You would think it really does. If you stop and think about it, it really does affect your psyche. You think, how could I be defending this person? But we have seen in pretty public cases, the OJ cases, those pieces where there seems to be for the attorneys an ability to separate out their job as a legal piece from the whole aspect of the human piece. And that's really the only way they can get through that, because, it's kind of clear what happened, but there is that ability to distinguish, and they come under quite a bit of criticism, but, I don't know. You think, okay, I'm doing my job, I guess, as with many jobs. I'm doing the best I can. My job is to defend this human being. And I think that once they make that separation, it's easier to go by the law. And that's what they're really focused on.
And we had criminal defense attorney Tim Jansen on last night, who said exactly that, along with Greg Skordas, that it's their job and they, take great pride in it. Dr. Amy, I saw you shaking your head when that question was being read. Anything you'd like to add? Before you do, though, greetings from Spain, a friend of the show in Marina, and proof that Surviving the Survivor is the future. Good Thursday morning from New Zealand. We are into the future. So anything you wanted to add on that, Dr. Amy?
Yeah, I just think I love that question because a lot of people believe, or I don't think a lot of people understand a defense attorney's job. Their job is to make sure that their client gets a fair trial, protection of an individual's constitutional rights, and really guilt or innocence shouldn't even matter. Of course, on a human level, it might be difficult to maybe defend someone that you believe is guilty, but that's not what their job is. As a defense attorney, your job is to protect constitutional rights and, make sure that everything is going, according to case law in the trial. But I get that question all the time from my students is, how could people defend these animals? And it's not about that. As, Darby said, it's your job. You sign up to do a job and it's not about who you like and who you don't like.
Very well said. Sounds like a college professor. Oh, wait, she is a college professor. So that is what you would teach the kids. So we were just coming off the Alec Murdaugh trial, and the word family annihilator was used every day or every other day by pundits. And I can't recall hearing that, Dr. Megan, in this trial. Are we biased because Lori is female? And would you describe her as a family annihilator? Shout out to Baby Doll with the heart emojis, a friend of the show.
Thank you for that question. So we haven't heard that a lot in this case, which is interesting. I do think there is a treatment that differs based on males and females. And I think we do tend to think of family annihilators as males, and they are predominantly. However, in this instance, if Lori, is found guilty, and I believe she is guilty, she would be considered a family annihilator. And, there's different typologies for family annihilators. There's some who they murder their families because their families no longer serve the function that they once served. So, making them look good. So like economic failure, these kinds of things, the family dynamic and the family image is so kind of destroyed that they must destroy the family in turn. There's people who kill their families because they have a perceived outside threat, almost like they think they're going to, be intervened with by law enforcement, by social workers. So they're perceiving that something else is going to happen. That's going to be really bad and destroy the family anyway. And then there's family annihilators like Chris Watts, who simply killed his family because he no longer wanted to be a part of that family. He wanted to move on. They weren't serving the purpose anymore of making him happy. So he decided, we'll kill them and move on. So Lori probably transcends a couple of these categories because I don't think her family was fulfilling the purpose anymore. But I also do believe she had some delusions about what was going on with her children based on her religious beliefs. But yeah, I would, it's a long answer. The short answer is I would consider Lori a family annihilator. Yes.
Super interesting. It's weird. I had not really considered that at all until now, to be honest.
Yeah.
And Alec Murdaugh, again, and you brought up financial crimes. We still don't know the 3-letter question why he did it. We sort of have an idea with Lori to some extent that maybe it was based in her demented beliefs, but interesting nonetheless. Amy, to you, Dr. Shlosberg, are there any criminals whose crimes are similar to Lori and Chad? Sorry to put you on the spot here because you have to go back, 100,000 years in history, but anything that comes to mind?
That's an interesting question because I was thinking about this question yesterday, as a matter of fact, and it reminds me a little bit, you see a little bit similarities to Andrea Yates, although I think Andrea Yates displayed more diagnosable mental illness, or it was a little more clear what was going on as far as, what we know about Lori's mental health at this point. I can't think of any offhand. I really can't. I was thinking John List because he killed his family, but I don't believe that it was not similar. The fact that she was working with her brother and her new husband, that makes it a little more unique. We've seen people maybe working with their, like Karla Homolka, her and her boyfriend killed her own sister. So I guess that's the most similar I could think of. But I don't know. This case is pretty unique to me. I can't really think of a close comparison.
And there's obviously like a cultish aspect to this case as well. By the way, before I pop Baby Doll's question up, Angela, female panel for a female defendant. Cool. I love it. Good point. Girl power, as I say to my daughters. She has she's trying out for her soccer team, and she's 7 years old. And I said, you better win or get on the team or don't come home. It's probably bad parent, Barbara. It's probably really bad parenting. I know, but try to teach her reality early on. Anyway, to you, Darby, from Baby Doll. Does anybody on the panel, Darby Fox, think Lori actually believes in what she is portraying? That's a question asked by a lot of people. And Sydney, Australia, is in the house.
You know, that's again, great question. I believe yes and no. So someone with that kind of a pathology does, to a certain extent, she probably has a clear understanding of what she did, but at moments think, oh, I couldn't have done this. These are my kids who would do that. So if we think about it, in order to be that devious and impulsive, to go ahead and create the whole scenario and all those patterns, you have to have a certain a break from reality, if you will. It's very hard to tell in this where she is, what's the pathology that we would exactly describe, but she does believe in her innocence to a certain extent. There was a reason, or someone else may have pushed her there, but she knows she did it, but she also thinks she's maybe not really responsible. I think.
Interesting analysis, and I've heard that from a few people. Only she knows, I guess. Catherine Regier is watching us in Hawaii, friend of the show. Girl power, and then we've got England in the house, and we round things out here, and we've got New England in the house. I love that. And then we've got Carly. Darby Fox, your house is beautiful, and I would have to agree. I feel like she is on the set of the Today Show, but it is real. It is a real house, not a set. And then we've got South Carolina, Alec Murdoch territory here. So Dr. Amy Shlosberg, Dr. Amy and Dr. Megan is what I will refer to you as, so I don't have to say all your last names over and over. 1 in 71 billion, Dr. Amy. That is the number with this hair. The partial DNA profile matched the DNA profile provided from Lori Vallow Daybell. The DNA expert said in court, the probability of randomly selecting a random individual in relation to that profile is 1 in 71 billion. There are people who say, well, look, she's a woman with long hair. Her hair might shed a little bit. You know, these kids were sleeping in the same bed even. Maybe it was some kind of contact thing. But what kind of aha moment is that for the jury?
I think my opinion's different than most people, to be honest. So I think it's clear it was her hair. I don't think there's, that 1 in 71 billion. I think everyone could agree it's her hair. I understand why it's such a strong piece of evidence, because of course it is the first time that there's a physical tie to her being there when the children, or at least being with the children's bodies. But I tend to err on the side of, transfer. I've heard of too many cases of, I do not believe she's being wrongfully convicted. Do not get that impression. But what I'm saying is there are many cases of when people have been wrongfully convicted, and it was because of transfer hair. Listen, I think that there's enough evidence without the hair, to be honest. I don't think they need the hair. I just don't think the hair is kind of the smoking gun the way a lot of people tend to believe it is.
And Dr. Megan, to you, I mean, just
wait, I get to talk about the hair, right? I got to talk about the hair too.
Oh, go for it. Go
Okay,
for it. Pick it up. No, pick it up on the hair. I was going to ask you something totally different, but go ahead.
Yeah, I want to say that my opinion is different than Amy's about the hair. And that's the reason I wanted to get it out there. I do agree that there's a good argument to be made for transfer of this DNA. And I think there are reasons why her hair could logically be found there. However, the defense hasn't done anything to elicit that. And this is the first piece of physical evidence. And I think the significance of it is it helps move the ball forward for the prosecution on the first-degree murder charges and not the conspiracy. So I think they've got plenty of circumstantial evidence. Certainly the conspiracy, there's no real doubt for me, but I think this moved the ball forward in terms of the murder charges itself.
Interesting.
And also, I just want to point out, sorry, I'll stop, but jurors like DNA evidence. It's very tangible, it's concrete. They trust it. So hearing that probably is going to be very impactful, I think, on the jury when they're back there deliberating.
By the way, Jersey women / Jersey girls, and my daughters both have Jersey girl shirts. They don't mess around. They tell you their opinion, and I love it. Sarah, we just talked about this, Darby. Is this a case of shared psychotic disorder, folie à deux? Would you describe it as such? Are they enabling each other? And by the way, Stephanie says I need to renew my Psychology Today subscription because of Darby. But what about the folie à deux?
Yes, I mean, there has to be, again, it's hard when we're just seeing one and then we have the whole other set with him. But yes, there is a shared psychology pathology there. And that's what gets them to go forward. However, at some point, because they are both probably malignant narcissists, that they could break on each other. And that's the interesting piece in a case like this. They seem aligned while everything's good. And then as things start to break apart, that's when we can start to determine those pieces.
Right.
I'm going to just have you guys, if it's not too much of a pain, just when you're not on, mute yourselves, because there is a weird little audio thing. But other than that, and I'd rather you do it than me do it, so I don't forget to unmute you. But so Megan, back to you. There's this issue too, and the question came up on the yesterday's show actually about serial murder. If she's convicted, is she a quote unquote serial killer? And I know it's a kind of a technical definition, but what is your take on all this? Obviously, she has not been convicted of these crimes yet.
If she's convicted, she's absolutely a serial killer. Yes. The definition does change about serial offenders and whether or not it was always considered to be 3 victims or more. There is now a less restrictive definition of 2 or more, a definition I tend to disagree with. I think 2 victims, while serious, doesn't signify serial murder. But yes, Lori would be, in my opinion, a family annihilator and a serial killer. I mean, we're talking about 5 victims here. So yeah, she's going to fit in that category. And it's interesting too, because, female serial murders are different than male murders, very different. When I teach that, it's kind of one of the constructs we look at. Males tend to kill for, thrill, lust, power, control. They tend to kill strangers when they are, committing their crimes. Whereas female serial killers, it's very different. They tend to kill people closer to home, and they tend to kill for very utilitarian purposes. So oftentimes that's money, or because, the children were blocking their relationship, something of that nature. So yeah, it's very different. And then you have the aspect of Chad and Lori. Alex is involved too, but Chad and Lori would almost be a team serial killing team, but which is accounts for about 18 to 19% of all serial offenders. But as Amy pointed out too, then you throw Alex in and you have a very unique situation in which you have multiple serial offenders working together. It's almost one of the rarest situations you would ever see.
Jennifer Castaldi weighing in. She's in Jersey. Hi. Jersey girl made it. Hi, Darby and Megan and Amy and Joel. Good to see you. Followed by Got Donuts, a friend of the show. I had to have 2 cocktails after listening to all the crazy followers and ideals of Chad and Lori. This case isn't about a belief system. It's about age-old murder, period. Lori and Chad are serial killers. Amy, did you need 2 or 3 cocktails? What's your response to this?
I'm going to go with upwards of 3. That's my response to that. I just wanted to add in one thing, just to piggyback off of what Megan was saying, is I find Alex's part in the crimes to be almost the most fascinating of all of this. And that question about, was there some sort of shared psychosis? It's interesting because it seems like when you look at Chad and Lori, maybe not, but I wonder if between Alex and Lori, there was something. I also don't know much about their relationship, and it would be really interesting to know, I want to know more about their dynamic, their family dynamic, to really understand it. Because I think his death obviously is very suspicious too, but that's a whole other story.
And you teed that right up for Darby Fox. That's come up quite a bit. And we've had people say, my mother's a licensed therapist. She defines it as an incestuous relationship, but not necessarily a sexual one. But it was definitely kind of perverted and definitely not of the norm. But Alex, her brother Alex, and Lori were very tight. What do you make of it, Darby?
Yeah, again, without knowing a little more about Alex, I would hesitate to say what the dynamic is there, like what was the power dynamic, etc. But it's very symbiotic. It is incestuous. Like the enmeshment is crazy. Like why? Who convinces their sibling to do that, right? And then we add another person, and I wonder what the dynamic. Why would Alex do this for his sister and Chad? There's another dynamic there. So I would think he idolized her in some way. He must have looked up to her. I don't know a lot about the mother. Was there some need she was fulfilling for him that he didn't get early on? Would be sort of a typical place to go with an explanation about their relationship.
And Megan, did you want to chime in on that? You looked like you were in the affirm. No, you're good. You look like you're ready to go. But this one here, marking time, just Darby, back to you on this. I think this is interesting. The podcast that they played in court, we'll get to that, merely reinforced my belief that I subscribe to no belief system whatsoever. What is the impact of a trial like this, I guess, on a larger scale? For the public that's reading and hearing about it, or just like in general, someone told me that there can be vicarious trauma. If you are paying too much attention to true crime or too involved in a specific case, it could have a deeper personal effect or impact. What is your take on that?
Well, I think, right now we actually see a little bit of that in this country. So I think, yes, that can happen. Certainly with the school shootings, there has started to be a little bit of a PTSD. Like to a certain extent, you can keep it at a distance and look at it and say, this is so crazy. Can you ever imagine this happening? And then there are pieces that start to come closer to home. And when you see the family involvement at all levels, then you kind of question that a little bit and think, okay, this is kind of creepy. It doesn't usually happen this way. And then, we add the other aspects that we're seeing. I think certainly with all the school shootings and not even just the schools, but lately we've had a cheerleader tries to open a car door and she's shot. Someone turns around in a wrong driveway, and they're shot. I think we do get this kind of a vicarious PTSD. Like this is scary, and it's a little bit hard to watch.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, I have children, and just today, another mass shooting in the United States of America, this time in Atlanta, where they're still looking for the gunman, as far as I know at this hour. And I was having lunch with my lovely mother, who can make time for me for lunch, but not for Patreon and YouTube member meetings. And, I said to her, and she's a social worker, I said, it's scary, and I have kids now, and, you hear this all the time, and people kind of tend to ignore it until, God forbid, it hits too close to home. But there is, I don't know, I feel a certain level of edginess just living in America with the amount of violence. We had Nina Hobson on last night, who is a detective in the UK and a bodyguard for Bono of U2, and told us some cool stories about that. But in some other countries, you don't have to worry about the violence to the extent that you do in the United States. With that said, in my mother's homeland today in Serbia, a young boy opened fire and killed 8 classmates. So it does happen in other places. And I said to my mother, what's going to happen to this little kid in Serbia? Are they going to put him in jail? And my mother nonchalantly said, in Serbia, one of the other parents will kill this kid now. That is, I said, so is it an eye for an eye? She goes, no, it's an eye for 2 eyes in Serbia. So very interesting. With the way the justice, I mean, she was saying it kind of tongue in cheek, but I think she kind of meant it as well. Daniel Malloy, the way Joel puts all the guests in these boxes reminds me of the Brady Bunch intro. Here's a story of a man named Brady who is bringing up 3 very lovely girls. I'm glad you brought that up. First of all, StreamYard does it, not me. Secondly, I love that because if everyone in STS Nation tells a friend, our boxes will quadruple and quintuple and everything else. So tell a friend about this. Amy, I know look at that. That's a sweet moment. We all have kids. Now tell your kid to get lost. No,
yeah. Okay, say bye now. Yes, you can watch TV. Go.
Yes. Make sure you're watching Surviving the Survivor.
Clearly forgot to lock the door on this recording. Sorry about that.
And make sure you win your soccer tournament or don't come home. Anyway, I know I asked you this last time, Amy, but what got you so intrigued with, this topic and with crime that you actually made it your profession?
I think it's just the unfairness of it all. I've always been really interested in issues of equity and just social justice issues in general. So I think just seeing how people are treated, there's no equal justice. And that's what attracts me the most to these stories. Stories, I have to be honest, stories like Lori Vallow are not the stories that I'm usually intrigued by. I've gotten quite intrigued by it, but, I'm usually a little more drawn to cases in which there's just such differential treatment between, 2 people that do something similar and, based on their demographics. Those are really the cases that draw me in. But yeah, again, just that inequity.
And Dr. Megan, same question to you. Why were you drawn into this to the point that you got a Ph.D. in it?
I've definitely told this story before, but my story is very different than Amy's. My story is that I used to watch crime shows with my mom. She would let me stay up late and watch some of her shows, and I became completely fascinated with the prosecutor, Grace Van Owen, I think her name was, in LA Law. And I really wanted to grow up and be just like her. And that was my dream. And I just was always interested in criminal law. But then I worked as a paralegal and I was like, I don't think I really want to practice law, but I'm so interested in the criminal justice system, how it works. Is it fair? The field has always really fascinated me, and the side of human behavior. I think one of the reasons people are so drawn to this case and, like the Murdaugh case, is because we can't understand how these people who maybe seemed to be law-abiding, or not might be Murdaugh, but they maybe at one point seemed to be normal. So what would drive a person to commit the most extreme acts that you can think of? And I'm certainly curious about that aspect as well. I think that's the part of criminology that really attracts me, is I really do like to know what is driving this behavior, what causes it. And so for me, that's always been, kind of the lore. It doesn't ever get boring either for me. Joel, you asked a question before, though, too, about how this trial impacts people. And I know that Darby was talking about vicarious trauma and PTSD. I also want to say about that is that there's a different kind of impact this kind of trial has on the nation, and trials like, Casey Anthony and Jodi Arias. And that is, these are what we call celebrity cases. They're very rare and very, few and far in between. But unfortunately, they really impact a good deal of society, what people think about our criminal justice system, for better or for worse. So that's a different kind of impact. A lot of us learn through this consumption of these trials, but this isn't, as Amy was saying, these aren't, your ordinary cases. And this really isn't what the criminal justice system is, regularly dealing with. So I just wanted to add that.
Interesting. And Dr. Amy, kind of to that point, one of the rubs against Judge Stephen Boyce in this case is that he did not allow cameras into the courtroom we had Dave Arenberg as the state attorney for Florida from Palm Beach County, and he was making a direct appeal to the Supreme Court to allow cameras in the Supreme Court. He thinks that it's 2023 and there should be transparency. These are public courts after all. What do you think about the fact that no cameras were allowed in here?
I understand the transparency argument, but people don't realize that these are a lot of people that are involved here are victims. And I think it exploits people a lot of times. I think that, especially in this case, when you hear the emotions of her son, of her sister, of her friends on the stand, they don't need the whole world to watch them in one of their lowest moments. And for someone like Lori, she doesn't need the attention either, because I think she would love this to be televised. If her pathology is anything like I think it is, I think that would be giving her more attention. So I personally, I was really pleased with that decision. But again, I do understand transparency, but media is still allowed in there, and there's still audio. So it's not like this is, a black box of what's going on. But I think it gives people a little more privacy. And I think it also protects jurors' anonymity for those who want to remain anonymous. Usually, it depends on the state, but some states don't show jurors anyway when cameras are allowed, but some states do. I think it's better for everyone, personally.
Interesting take. And as a former media guy, I know obviously there are media companies that filed motions to allow cameras. They say it is, to allow transparency for the public, but obviously they want it because, it is content for them. But I think it does, I think that there's probably less interest kind of per capita, if you could break it down, between this and Alec Murdaugh, because that trial was on TV every single day and people were glued to it. People are glued to this, I think, for similar but also different reasons. Barbara Curran, to you, Darby. She says Lori does not have remorse because she believes she saved her children's souls from going to hell. She actually sees herself as a good protective mother instead of a murderer. Extremely delusional. Would you like to respond to Barbara's statement?
So I agree with Barbara that she's extremely delusional, but I don't totally believe that she believes she's a great mother who saved her children. I think that she had a different motive, and Chad was much more at the forefront of what she was trying to do. And, getting rid of the ex-husband, the whole dynamic, the brother, I don't think that really was what she was thinking. And again, what we have to remember with someone with this kind of a pathology, they can't hold all the pieces together that well to make a complete, consistent story, if you will. And one of the reasons that this case is on trial is evidence of their inability to make a very consistent story and to keep all the pieces together. Like, you look back on it, and if you just read the newspaper, the Idaho Statesman or whatever, you're like, oh my gosh, this is so obvious. How could, what? They're guilty. So that goes to her pathology, where she's like, she wasn't thinking about, am I going to get away with this? Or am I saving my children? That was not her motive, I believe.
Doris, a lot of people think like her, points out that there could even be 7 deaths, and she lists them here: Lori's sister, Joe Ryan, an ex-husband, Charles Vallow, ex-husband, Kylie, JJ, Alex, and Tammy. Obviously, Alex died under some suspicious circumstances as well, but we don't know the answer. Maybe one day with the development with DNA testing and all the stuff science has to offer, maybe one day we will find out. Dr. Amy, back to you. You were talking about cameras and how we have to remember that these are real victims. And a lot of times we do forget that when we're covering true crime. But Larry and Kay Woodcock, they were in the courtroom, JJ's grandparents and Tylee's grandparents. And they've been very emotional. Kay Woodcock is actually, not since the trial started, the latter weeks of it, but early on, she was in our chat room before she traveled to Boise, and she was commenting quite a bit. we have to remember that even family members of the people on trial, they are victims in a way, right? And how do you think they should be treated?
They should be treated as victims. They're different kinds of victims, right? But this case is also different than other cases in the sense that a lot of people that, it's the same family. So family of the victim, family of the accused, same people. So they're dealing with the trauma on both ends because it's hard for family members. None of us want to believe our loved ones could do anything heinous like she's being accused of. Right. And then on top of that, they lost loved ones. So it's really the worst of all situations for these family members.
I mean, you heard there was such pain. Some of the most painful testimony, Lori's sister, hearing that phone call between Lori and her sister. I felt devastated for her. I mean, you can hear how much pain, how much suffering she's enduring too.
Darby, to you, one of the things we actually did a show about this on Sunday night, so I'm interested, and we're going to get to some of this testimony in a minute. One of Lori's sort of ex-friends, they're all ex-friends now for the most part, was on the stand and basically said that Lori at one point had threatened to kill her, and we'll get into the details. But, excuse me, what is the deal with her inner circle of friends? I mean, there was just such weirdness going on and people talking crazy, and it appeared that no one's antenna went fully up till after the fact. Should these antennae have gone up earlier? I know I asked the question of someone else. They're not legally liable, but what's the deal? Like, if your friend is talking like they're insane, do you need to speak up and say something? If you see something, say something.
Well, we all wish that, because in most of these cases, there was a lot of red flags beforehand. But again, what you have to remember is about people that can commit these kind of heinous crimes. They are very powerful and they're very charismatic and they draw people in. And I would imagine we've all had that friend that we know treated us very poorly, but we still wanted to be in her group or his group, right? So it is a little bit of that mentality. And I think that they were kind of getting the idea, but they were scared, or they thought, what's going to happen to me, yet not strong enough to pull away. And I think that that's unfortunate, because we do see some very bad endings when we don't have the ability to go with our gut.
And Dr. Amy, does the judicial system need to be kind of looked at a little more closely? And I bring it up because I forget the exact number, but jurors on this case, and the same with the Alec Murdaugh trial, making like $5 or $10 a day, $5 for a half day, $10 for a full day. And it's a tough job. Do we need to look at that and take civic duty and what jurors do more seriously, do you think?
That's an interesting question.
Out of left field.
Yeah, because I was actually I was about to respond to something Darby was saying, but I will pivot there with you. I don't know. I mean, it's our civic duty. I do think that there needs to be maybe, I guess maybe more of an incentive, because not everyone's employer will pay them. Depending on the job you have, some employers will, they have to continue to pay you or allow you the days off without penalizing you. But people who work for themselves or people who are working off the books, then yeah, I think a lot of good jurors, aren't able to sit on juries because it's just, prohibitive, because they just can't do it financially. I don't actually like our jury system very much in general. So that's a whole other conversation. I would
give us a sneak peek. Give us like one reason.
I would prefer to see a panel of experts, judges who make decisions similar to what we do in our Supreme Court. I understand why we don't, of course, jury of peers, but very rarely is it actually a jury of an individual's peers. So I don't think it always comes out I don't think it comes out fair usually. But
interesting take. I bring it up because reports have been coming out of the courtroom, Megan, we'll slide over to you to get your take on this too. That's just the jurors seem a little antsy. They're intent, but they're getting up, they're stretching more, they're yawning more, they're talking to each other more. I mean, we're in week 5, day 21. It's a tough job to sit there and listen not only to some gruesome testimony and see horrific photos, but you're also listening to a lot of minutia and a lot of details. I mean, how tough is it to be a juror?
Oh, I think to be a juror in an average case is already probably hard, but then to be a juror on one of the most infamous cases our country will see, with this level of violence, especially with the autopsy findings, I just think this has to be the most emotionally draining, taxing process, and I feel like the jurors are probably all going to need like some healthy recovery time after their service is done. This is a really hard job. I don't envy them, and I wouldn't want to be sitting on this jury either. I think it's very, very hard on them.
And not to be confused with Darby Fox, we've got Barbie Rice, similar. I'm going to be just as hard on Chad for the murder of these, which is good to know. And then Beverly says, if Lori ain't guilty, the Pope ain't Catholic. And this I'm putting up just because I want to say it. From Ileana Marcela Rosas Flores. Hello from Monterrey, Nuevo León, Mexico. Viva Mexico. I love it. My wife is Central American, which I know Mexico is north of there. But greetings to our friends in Mexico as well. So this podcast was played, and there's some testimony to get into. But this podcast was played later in the day yesterday, and Lori, Darby, to you, says things are going to start happening in this podcast. She says, and this was in 2018, oddly enough. She says things are going to start happening in the next 2 years, and things will change. We're going to prepare by turning ourselves completely over to Jesus Christ, and then goes on to say, the Lord is building his army. He is calling people to do missions, and they are to go forward in faith, and this is what he tells you. What's your take on this? I mean, if you were, I don't know if you do private practice, but let's say you did do private practice. You do. So what if someone came into your office and said this to you? How would you react?
Well, I think that's delusional, and either, I believe that those are the kind of comments that come when you don't know what else to do. So your sort of your ego, your alter ego, you're trying to figure out within yourself, how am I going to cover for this? And always to take things to another power or something external that you're not responsible for is a very logical way to kind of give yourself some relief, right? Off the hook. We do that every day in what we do. Like, oh, okay, well, it wasn't my fault. The school bus was in front of me if I'm late or something like that. So I know that's a little example, but that is the kind of thing we do. We look to a bigger power. And I think she started to sense she was going to be caught and had to find a way not only to internally justify that, but also to absolve herself of some of the responsibility.
Interesting. I haven't heard anyone say that they thought she was going to get caught. So interesting to hear that. Angie for Justice writes, Chris Watts' mistress told him she didn't want to be with him if he had kids. And now he's in prison for the rest of his life, where he belongs. Brianna, Megan, I wanted you to have a chance to respond to this. I don't consider Lori Vallow as a family annihilator in a diabolical sense. A family annihilator to me performs the killing themselves. Your response?
Yeah, well, if she's convicted on the first-degree murder charges and there's some evidence, she may have been involved. I don't think so because, she's got the alibi and, I don't think she necessarily was. I understand the point, absolutely. It's kind of like saying, they said that Manson wasn't a serial killer because even though he's always called a serial killer, he commanded his followers to do the actual killing. So I do understand that in the traditional sense, if it didn't happen at her hand, then she wouldn't necessarily be. But remember, this is all conspiracy. She's got a hand in all of this, even if it wasn't her hand that directly perpetrated the crime. So I still would consider her a family annihilator.
Sarah here writes, imagine thinking of your family as that expendable. And Tina, this goes back to me asking you this question, Amy, about other cases. I've never heard of this case, but that doesn't say much. Tina Marina, what about the Lafferty brothers? You familiar with it? I don't want to put everyone. Okay, then I'm not the only one that hasn't heard about it, but that is what the Google is. As a matter of fact, today my mother was screaming at me because I didn't know what something meant. Someone brought up a fire from 1900s in Nazi Germany, and the Reichstag fire, which I had never really heard. I heard the name, but didn't really know much about it. And my mother proceeded to scream at me in a public restaurant to Google if I don't know stuff. So that's what I did. And then I found out. Jennifer Castaldi, girl power to soccer daughters, but only if they win. Darby's never going to come on again. So
my
Amy,
girls were soccer players.
But you don't force them to win. I'll take it easy.
They might say something different about us forcing them to train.
I won't make her sleep on the floor tonight if she didn't make the team. I'll let her sleep on her mattress. Dr. Amy, back to you for a moment. So this podcast, then Lori went on to say that I too have seen Jesus Christ, and then Melanie Gibb chimed in. The minute I saw her, I'm sorry, Lori says, the minute I saw her, Lori says, I knew she'd be one of the women I was supposed to be involved with. What do you make of these kind of conversations? Because we hear Lori now in the courtroom, even though she's not on the witness stand. And how do you think it's playing with the jurors?
I thought a lot about what was the purpose of this, right? Mm-hmm. I'm wondering, is the purpose so Lori, it's almost like a way for the jurors to hear from Lori without Lori being on the stand, so that they can kind of see her, her thought process and her delusions, really. Also, I'm wondering if it was to show that she had some of these extreme views prior to meeting Chad, because this was recorded prior to her becoming romantically involved with Chad. As long as I'm understanding this correctly, she knew of him from his writings, but she wasn't involved with him yet. So I think some people may have suspected that it was him that kind of instilled a lot of these beliefs in her. But I think the podcast recording shows us that no, she was having a lot of these extreme thoughts prior to getting together with him.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, Darby, do you think it was inevitable that she was going down this path of destruction, regardless of Chad, Darby?
That is interesting. It's hard to say. I'd hate to be the one to say, but with that kind of a pathology, probably around some kind of a path like this, yes. I think he pushed it. And I think, again, that was kind of a mentality that gave her like, okay, I'm right. Actually, there's other people. There's someone else along this journey with me. But, that's kind of projecting, but maybe accurate.
An accurate projection.
Yeah.
Dr. Megan, to you from Curtis Hill, I heard earlier today that Lori and Chad are like Bonnie and Clyde. Thoughts? That's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I suspect you'll hear comparisons like that as well, because they're, the male-female duo. I wouldn't necessarily compare that. I mean, I think Bonnie and Clyde were equally violent, but in, a different regard. I was just thinking about, all the other, the team serial killers and all the comparisons that people might make on them. I do understand it, but also remember the weird thing is that even though he's not here, Alex is culpable too. So this is not just this is a team in the real sense that there's 3 people. So it's a differentiator, as I said before.
This next questions are awesome tonight, STS Nation. This one from Jan Kowalski. And Dr. Amy, I'll throw this one to you. What makes me angry is that Lori never questioned Chad about his children being all light, but not hers. That leads me to be sure she felt like there were obstacles for her new life, so now they're gone. The consensus is Chad's children were older and weren't in the way, so conveniently they were light, and hers are dark. But what do you think? And look at this. Bella Michelle, Jersey girl. The Jersey girls looking out.
Joel, I was going to say just that. I don't think his children were seen as obstacles. But I also, I'm not sure that, I think Lori might have had some feelings towards her children even before she met Chad, particularly JJ. And, and actually both of her children, she made comments even before Chad about JJ being difficult and about Tylee being, difficult in different ways. Although people said she was a good mother from what I heard, but she did make comments to people. So I think she maybe had something out for her children even before Chad, but I would go more with the original hypothesis that her children were young enough to be in the way of her relationship with Chad.
And as you can tell, I'm not the only crazy dad. Sarah writes, my dad used to write me notes in my lunch. He wrote all A's or you're all gone a lot. He was hilarious. I still have some of those notes. I hope he didn't put them in the actual sandwich, but that's a good idea, and I might have to do that. Megan, this comment is interesting. STS is on fire tonight, marking time. Family annihilators are generally defined as a whole family, though, like Watts. Chad's 5 children, all alive and well. Murdoch even doesn't quite fit because the older son is fine. Megan, is that true? I mean, is Alec Murdoch not, will he not be defined as a family annihilator because Buster is still alive?
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely a thought. It's a thought in that case, and I know everyone wants to know why not Buster. I think that they still fit the mold for family annihilators, and I think that, yes, if you want to be absolutely technical, eliminating the entire family would be the truest form of a family annihilator. But I still believe that they both, I think they both fit. And look, Lori's family she had an ex-husband, and she was married to Charles, and she had 2 children. They're all gone due to her involvement, whether, she was coerced or doing some coercion, or, there's a conspiracy, it involves her, and her entire family is gone. So I think she most definitely does fit there in the spirit of it. And I think Murdoch does too, even though he did not, he did not kill his entire family. He still eliminated a good portion of his family, his wife and son. So I still would probably put that as a family annihilator as well.
And the chief marketing officer just hopped in and put, it's not too late to hit the like button and subscribe. She's also the chief technical officer and my wife. She is behind the scenes. Ann Vroom, does the panel think the shooting, Darby, this one we'll toss to you, of Charles Vallow was a sort of critical line crossing for this criminal gang, Alex and Lori and Chad? Was that sort of the catalyst, although people think a previous husband, Joe Ryan, was possibly killed too, but did they kill this person and then kind of have at it afterwards?
I think that helped to kind of keep things going, right? There was something that, there was a path that they were going down constructively. I don't know. I think it was people in their way. If you could describe who were the ones that we need to clear, it's the people that could be in our way. And certainly he was, and younger children would be, where we see the older kids that have kind of gone off are not obstacles. So I think it's more about the notion of what are our obstacles? What are preventing us from doing what we really want to do? And that's where that indifference comes. Like, I don't really care who's in our way. We're going to get rid of them.
And Darby, double duty for you here real quick from Nightwood. Waiting for a verdict, and a verdict could come in the next few days, we're being told. This could wrap up very quickly. Waiting for a verdict makes everyone nervous. What's a good way, Darby, to relieve stress ahead of something like this?
So I think if you can not watch, not be sitting around waiting for it is really important, because then you start kind of going through in your mind all the different pieces. And I think one thing that's particularly hard about this case is, the autopsy reports, all the details are so graphic, and they're hard to put aside and settle with. So to relieve the stress, it would be best if people didn't just wait for it and kind of make it a very celebrity type thing. It's like, this is a very tragic situation on all ends. These people are quite disturbed. We've lost many human beings. Like, actually, we need to take some distance, is what I feel helps, and do grounding things and spend time with your family, for heaven's sakes. Forget all the little stuff. It really doesn't matter.
Very well put. I say that often, and I don't listen to my own advice. Kathy, to you, Dr. Amy. Bonnie and Clyde were criminally minded. Lori and Chad are psychos. What I wonder is when and if Lori finally becomes stable and has to face the reality of what she's done. Have we seen this? And again, I'm putting you on the spot here, so I apologize. But have we seen other criminals who kind of come to after the fact, like maybe cult members? I don't know. I can't think of anyone specific. Do you think there's going to be kind of a moment of reckoning with Lori where she realizes, man, I really screwed up, or it's just a pathology?
I don't believe that she will ever feel like she really screwed up. I suspect that she believes that she had to do what she did for whatever reason. Whether or not it was delusional is a big question. And no, I don't believe that she will, even because, I mean, she was found incompetent and then they restored her to competency. So, maybe you would have suspected that once she regained competency, maybe that would have been the point for her to have a coming to, right? But it doesn't seem like that changed much, I don't think. May I say one thing about Chad Daybell, which I think is important?
You can say two things.
The question about a lot of people in their circle failing them or failing everyone by not reporting things, like Chad reached out for help. He called the police in Arizona. Oh my God, am I saying Chad? I'm talking about Charles. My bad. I'm sorry. Yeah. Megan's face was like horrified. Sorry, but thank you for letting me continue going. Okay, this is going to make a lot more sense now. Lori's husband, Charles, he feared for his life and he called for help, and then he was murdered. And I think I'm not saying we need to blame those police officers, but I think that's a place we can look at and learn from. And, there was some ball dropping there, and I think we can learn from that. And just because Lori Vallow was an attractive woman who was flirting with the police, they believed her over him. And look what happened. It started a series of many unfortunate, tragic, horrific events.
Megan, did you want to jump in? I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. I also was thinking about, I agree with Amy. I think that people were, and Darby said this before, but I think that it's always easy to blame people. Like, oh, they should have said something. Everyone knew. But I think they were afraid of Lori and Chad. I really do. I think people really feared them, like a legitimate fear, and that prevented them from coming forward. Because if it can happen to Charles and her children are gone, what would they do to them? So I understand this legitimate fear that people had in reporting their behavior.
Darby, did you want to hop in as well?
Well, I just wanted to reiterate one thing we do know, and to your point, Amy, regarding Charlie, is we do often see when we look back and have hindsight in complicated cases like this, often when people have that gut feeling that I'm scared and something's going to happen to me, we as a nation don't do a great job. And I'm not going to put blame in any certain area, but we don't really listen. And lots of research has shown us that that gut feeling is really something we need to listen to, because quite often it's right. You know, I'm right down the street, literally, from the Jennifer Dulos case. When people have that, and if we can take away something, when someone says, I'm scared to death, like, please, I need some help, we need to do a better job of protecting people.
Yeah, and we talked about that, if the Chandler PD is even potentially liable, because they were called multiple times, and basically Charles, there's obviously that's more of a legal issue, but as Darby points out, it could be a social issue as well when people cry for help. And oftentimes you hear, obviously the majority of domestic violence crimes are against women, but in this case, Charles was being harassed to the point where he thought his life was in danger. And he's seen on that body cam footage talking to police about it, and he wound up dead. I was trying to figure out this name and then realized it rhymes with Yitzhak Rabin. And she was calling me out because on the last show, I said, love you, America. That's how I sign off. But she says there are so many from outside the U.S., love from Australia, never miss a show. But if I had to sign off and list every country that everyone was from, we had someone from Tasmania yesterday, that would be the show. But I'll try to be selective and sign off. So remind me to say love you, Australia at the end, in case I forget I'm saying it right now. On to Audrey Baratiero. She met Lori at a conference in 2018, and she was on the stand today. And she said something that was kind of jaw-dropping, and I will quote it now. She said that and she was relaying what Lori said to her. You're so naive and too trusting. You're like a little child. You think the world is all unicorns and rainbows. And by the way, Lori at this point is supposed to be very religious and a devout believer. And she continues, you go around helping people and serving them. Well, I've got news for you. Not everyone is a good person, and not everyone can be so kind. Then this woman, Audrey, says she threatened to kill me. She said she would cut me up and wasn't in the mental place to do it, but would get herself in a place to do it. There would be blood and bleach and something about trash bags. She would bury me in a place nobody would ever find me. Darby, this was very controversial because she did not say this to the grand jury, and immediately her defense, Lori's defense team jumped in and accused this woman of lying on the stand. And then according to reporters, people in the viewing room appeared to be divided 50-50. This woman's making it up. No, she's telling the truth. Does this, what she's saying here, does this fit Lori's MO, do you think?
Yes. Those are some pretty graphic details, and people don't usually make up such detailed descriptions of how they're going to treat some other person or what they've done. The bag, the bleach, she's thought that through. And so that's probably not likely made up.
And we'll start to wrap up in a few moments. But so this woman was on the stand for a good portion of the morning today. And something else I thought and there was a lot of things that were interesting. But Megan, to you, Audrey is now relaying a conversation she had with Chad, and she says he asked me to be Lori's friend and that she needed a friend. He said that he couldn't talk to her all the time and that maybe I could be someone to uplift or be a friend. I said, okay. It's interesting to me because she seemed to have friends all the time, but they didn't seem to be real friends. This is going to sound like an insane question, but is it hard for killers to have an intimate circle of actual real friends?
Depends on what type of killer you're talking about, but someone like, Lori, with some of the traits that she has, I would say her intimate relationships are more superficial than they can be real. So I don't think they're as genuine. I'm not sure that she would see it that way. But I think it would be very hard for her to form very meaningful, real bonds in the way that I think most of us can do when we have close, good friends, like the way Amy and I do. I think Lori would have real trouble in interpersonal relationships. I think she did. I think there's something to be said for the fact, I'm not trying to knock anyone, but she was married 5 times and they were short relationships. She would break up, go to another one, break up. I think that Lori Vallow has a lot of trouble with intimate relationships on every front.
Darby, Chad told Audrey, this woman on the stand today, that he had been Jesus's brother, and I'm picturing him in your office telling you this in Connecticut. So Chad told Audrey he had been Jesus's brother in a prior life. Chad was married to Lori, who was named Elena, and they walked in Palestine with Jesus. Chad told Audrey she was married to Jesus. Her name was Joanna when she was married to Jesus. When Chad Daybell told you in a previous life, she says, I thought it could be true because I trusted him. This is kind of a 2-part question. What's your, I know you can't diagnose people, so that's a bad word to use, but what's your take on Chad's delusional state here, thinking that he existed in many previous lives? And then it was a question I asked earlier. She trusted him. If someone said this to me, a red flag would go up. But with Audrey, she kind of went along with it. Why, do you think?
So I'll answer that last part first. Why would Audrey go along with that? I don't know that Audrey, again, we want to be careful here because we don't know the people or all the details, but Audrey appears to be a person that was pretty gullible, and there was some kind of allure to Chad and him asking her to be Lori's friend. So there was some kind of appeal there that made her feel good about herself. And so I think that initially she would go along with that, like, oh, okay, well, that's interesting, but that sounds kind of weird, but you want me to be your wife's friend, and all right, you still seem like a nice guy, and you just kind of blow it off because you have your own internal weakness. So I think that might be a reason she might initially say, oh, okay, well, that's kind of odd, but whatever. But then to the first part about Chad, I would say, okay, this guy's pretty delusional and we need to get him some serious help. And, more medical institution as opposed to the, therapist that's looking at strategies for anxiety and stress management and that kind of thing.
Stephanie, Ella, to you, Dr. Amy, this has come up a little bit. Alex did suffer head trauma. Summer Shiflett, the sister, said so on the stand. Statistically speaking, I believe that every known serial killer had experienced head trauma at a young age. Is this true?
Absolutely true. And Megan could probably speak to it better. She probably knows the statistics on it, but that is definitely, there is a very large correlation between head trauma and serious offending later in life.
Wow, you learn something new every day. It makes sense, but I had no idea. But Megan, pick that baton up and tell us.
Yeah, because I do teach serial murder, so I can tell you almost all serial murderers have experienced head trauma in various ways. So, for example, John Wayne Gacy, he experienced head trauma, but his was through being abused by his father. Richard Ramirez, otherwise known as the Night Stalker, he had 2 serious head traumas. One, I think, was from a fall off a swing. Another was hitting a dresser. I can think of just almost all of serial offenders have definitely experienced and trauma and in particular head trauma. So yeah, I think that's very accurate.
Candy Temple, thank you so much. Became a new YouTube member, but TGQ pointing out, I had a brain injury and I don't want to hurt or kill. So obviously we do not mean that as a sweeping statement where everyone who's had any kind of brain trauma.
Megan's about to say, right? Correlation does not equal causation. I saw it in your eyes.
Yeah, also, I mean, I would totally agree. It doesn't mean anyone who gets a head injury goes off and commits crimes. Absolutely not. But it does mean that with the serial offenders that we do know that almost all of them did experience that kind of trauma. So again, yeah, it's definitely not a causation thing for sure.
I'm going to guilt my mom because she loves to say, I must have dropped you on your head as a child. So now it takes on new meaning. So now I'm going to tell her that. Darby, we will start to wrap this up, I promise. Lori said that Tammy had spirit in her. And Audrey says, I told her I did not. Lori tells Tammy that she had a spirit in her that needed to be taken out. And Audrey responds, I told her I did not want to help and did not want to participate. Audrey starts to cry on the stand, and she highly pressured me, saying, you're supposed to be my friend. You're supposed to help me. And I reiterated I didn't want to share, and she kept on going. What does that say to kind of the manipulative behavior that the curtain is being peeled back here, regarding Lori potentially being very manipulative when she is left alone with some of these friends?
Well, I think that's goes to sort of many of the things we've talked about tonight, how scared people are, how powerful a sociopath or a psychopath. In this case, I think we have pieces of both, right? They're, is it the chicken or the egg? They kind of overlap quite a bit. So it shows there was something that Audrey, she kind of got into this friendship because it kind of felt good for her and she felt wanted and needed. And then it started to cross a line. And she starts to cry and break down and says, I can't do that. So I would imagine that it's fair to say Lori did that to pretty much everyone. I'd be interested if Alex were still alive. I think that there's a very powerful component there. Anytime we see someone like this, something that goes along with the charisma, that power is they quickly break, right? It goes to anger, impulsivity, and regulation are really impaired. And I think, again, you would say that with almost any serial killer, they have a hard time with emotional regulation. And that is a piece that we saw here.
And Megan, to you from Geek S61, does the fact that Chad and Lori, knowing the people on the dark list were to be killed, make these premeditated murders from a technical standpoint, from the way you look at things?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think they were premeditated murders for sure. In many regards. I think they did planning. I think they had preparation. Afterwards, they had the cover up. I think they had all these steps probably planned out, even if it wasn't the best plan. Because one thing I still can't wrap my own head around is how Lori thought no one in the world was going to notice that her two kids are never to be seen again. No one was going to care. That is where the lack of planning and rationality really breaks. So they had this plan, but in that plan, they didn't consider no family member's ever going to ask about JJ or Tylee. So yeah, I think it was premeditated, but I still can't understand that one component and how she thought no one would actually care.
Darby Fox, with the best background in all of podcasting, coming to us from Connecticut, is a child and adolescent family therapist who my kids will need very shortly. With over 25 years of experience with children and families from diverse backgrounds, her first book, Rethinking Your Teenager, Shifting from Conflict and Control to Structure and Nurture to Raise Accountable Young Adults. It received critical acclaim. She's been on the television all the time. You've seen her if you've watched TV news. This is an interesting final question for you, Darby. Carol Layton. If Chad and Lori had gotten away with this, I wonder which one would have killed the other first. First off, would one of them kill the other? And if you're a betting woman, Darby, who would have taken out the other one?
That's a question.
Yeah, this is like, okay.
And your final thoughts.
You know what? My final thought would be Lori would kill Chad. I think there's a lot of evidence that would go either way, but I think Lori would kill Chad.
And Darby, since everyone is watching and it'll make it awkward for you, do you promise to come back on as a guest now that we've tortured you?
Yes, I promise.
Okay, awesome. You guys all heard that. Megan Sachs, Dr. Megan Sachs. She is a full professor of criminology and the graduate program director at Fairleigh Dickinson University. She teaches classes including women and crime, serial killers, and crime policy. And she and Amy host not one, but two podcasts, Women and Crime and Direct Appeal. You heard that here. Women and Crime and Direct Appeal, now in season 2. Megan, your final thoughts on this, and I guess my final question to you is, where will this go down in the echelon of major, criminal trials? Will this be toward the top of the list?
Yeah, this is one of those, celebrated cases. The only caveat there is that we don't have the, the televised access to it, but, it's definitely going to go down as, one of the more famous trials because of the uniqueness of the crimes, the offenders, every aspect that it included. I guess also final thoughts here is that it's not game over yet. I've heard people saying that it's a wrap, it's looking bad. I mean, it is, but we still don't know yet what the defense will do. I've heard people saying that they might have to put Lori on the stand. I don't think that will happen. I think that would be just a disaster, but a prosecutor's dream to have her on the stand. But yeah, this case is certainly one that's going to stay with us. I also think it's because America became so involved and so concerned about JJ and Tylee. We saw them all over the media. It's like we felt like we knew them and we were so invested in them. So I think this one's going to resonate and stay with us for a long time. Thank you for having us, Joel.
I love having you guys. Will you guys come back?
Of course.
All right. You've been here before, so that's why I didn't force that question. But Dr. Amy Shlosberg, she has a master's degree in forensic psychology and a Ph.D. in criminal justice. She is currently the head honcho, the department chair, and an associate professor of criminology at Fairleigh Dickinson University. And she is the other half of Women in Crime and Direct Appeal. If I haven't said it enough, it is Women in Crime and Direct Appeal. And I highly recommend it, and get out there and listen to it. Sarah has a question. Will Lori be studied by people like you, criminologists? Yes or no? And your final thoughts.
Yes, I think that she will be up there with the Ted Bundys and the Manson and the Gacy and all of these other, when I have my students write papers about an offender to try to attach theories to it, it's always like the top 5. I think she's going to be among those cases that people are really fascinated by. And I would love to just share one final thought, that it will be very interesting to see what happens with Chad's case. Because I would love to, if I was a betting lady, I would say that if Lori is found guilty of all the charges, then I think we'll see Chad turning a little bit. I think if Lori is found not guilty, then Chad is in big trouble.
And that is interesting. And we had the director of Sins of Our Mother, the Netflix documentary, on this story. And she thinks that Chad, as another viewer said, is going to run her over and then back up and run her over again. Joel, smash that like button for STS. Please do that. That'd be great. And I love this. Sarah says, the CEO, Joel's wife, please do an episode. We'd all love it. Every time I tell her that, she's like, leave me alone. But we'll get her on this show. Maybe during the Carm's appearance, I will also have the chief marketing officer and CEO make an appearance as well. Quick programming note. Tomorrow night, we have Tara Malik, criminal defense attorney out of Boise. We have Joshua Ritter, criminal defense attorney, who is a big-time podcaster. And we have Dave Leroy, who is the former attorney general of the great state of Idaho and also the former lieutenant governor. So we've got some big wigs on the show as well as we did tonight. So thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. Until next time, love you, America. Love you, Australia. Love you a lot, New Jersey. Love you, Connecticut. Love you, New Jersey again. Till next time.
Thank you, Joel.
Thanks.
Thank you, Joel.